What's up, everybody? Do you want to know how to get through the holidays without pulling your hair out or murdering a relative? Well, you're in luck because today's episode, Danny and I are going to be talking about how to get through Thanksgiving and Christmas by focusing on gratitude and generosity.
Ooh,
I'm this is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's my buddy Danny. How you doing, Danny?
good. How you doing, Randy? You know, it.
Oh,
I
I'm
just. Oh, I asked the question. I just heard this. It was funny. I was listening to this thing the other day, and the person said, like during like the lockdown, last year, they were like, I realized I really enjoyed it during the holidays, not having to go out, and it's like that stress and pressure, from all the holidays, just was eliminated because you couldn't go anywhere.
but there's so much stress this time of year because it's basically like three very, very action-packed months followed by 2 months of the most depressing cold weather you could ever imagine. It's like basically, summer's over, kids go back to school, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then just nothing but cold weather and depression for 2 months. And so
Yeah.
it's a very difficult transition.
But it's funny too, because I think like for so many of us too, it's like you feel all of a sudden all these pressures and expectations and like obligations placed on you. It's like, well, shit, if I see them, do I have to see them? Blah blah blah. And like we end up feeling this need to like run around, drive all over the place. And I mean, I remember like, trying to see multiple families and stuff and like multiple people. It's like hard. It's just hard to manage that time. You feel stressed, you're driving a lot. It's not fun always. And it's like, is that the point of the holidays? It seems, counterintuitive.
Yeah. It can also be a somewhat difficult time because we speak a lot of times. You actually mentioned this in one of our episodes about saying no. And like it's a very difficult time to actually have your boundaries intact because you're spending time with your parents, with your family that you grew up with. And this was a time before you really had a defined personality and you really knew who you were as
Yeah.
an adult. So like you weren't even allowed to have boundaries at that point. And because
Yeah.
of that, family's very good at guilting you into doing things. I think that's one of the things that family's best at. And so like this time of
That's
year,
what they do.
getting beyond what you're able to do, what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because I think like a lot of times, we when we're seeing family or maybe friends, that we haven't seen in a long time and all, it's like there's also that stress too. And I don't know if you've ever felt this too, of like, where you are in life and like whether that's like, what I mean? Like that stress of like failed expectations and like, am I like doing well enough or blah blah blah, or somebody's doing better than me? Like we start comparing ourselves and all. I think that gets really hard too. There's a certain stress and like, and then you add to that like the presents and everything and the gift giving, and there's an extra layer of sort of, I think, like, people end up spending more than they should. They end up, going overboard just to sort of essentially save face, right? And I think that becomes a big problem too, and a big source of stress.
Well, you mentioned two very big topics right there. So like the first one is like the what are you up to in life? What are you doing? Where we associate value with people based on their job, something like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
like that's the first big messed up thing. Then the second thing is we're busy buying gifts to impress people we don't even like with money we don't even have. And so
Yeah.
like that's the second big
That's actually a
problem
big deal.
going on right there. So yeah, I mean the first one I've definitely felt that where like everybody's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I just kind of like to hide when I'm up to, like I mean that's just me personally because I don't think it has any relevance on anything whatever. So I just kind of like just kind of brush it off a little bit because whether I'm doing good or whether I'm doing bad, eh, I am where I am, and it'll take me however long it takes me to get to where I'm supposed to go. So yeah, but I totally know it, especially like going back home. Everybody's like, "Oh, what are you doing? Where have you been? Are you
Yeah.
married yet? Do you have kids? Did you buy a house?" And it's like, what the social
Those,
responsibilities number one, two, and three? That's what I'm supposed to do. It's like, yeah,
well, that's one of the other big problems I think too, is these expectations of, when we're younger, we're taught, right? Like that you're doing well in life if you tick these boxes, right? You've gone to school, you get your degree, you meet someone, you get a house, you have a job, have kids, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, well, what if that's not what I want? Or, and what if it doesn't happen in that order? It's like, and, this idea of valuing people based on these arbitrary things that I think is very problematic. And it causes a ton of stress for a lot of us. I think, as I've gotten older, that's bothered me less. But, I think when you're young, especially, that can be really sort of on your mind, right? That you're not doing good enough, that you're not good enough. And somehow that should be a source of concern, right?
Yeah. I had definitely had this experience this week where I went to a party with some friends, and it was one of these like high society parties where everybody has their pinky up. They're really trying to like show off that they're
putting on
better
airs.
than everybody. Oh my gosh. I was like nauseous the moment I stepped in there. And it was really like, it reminded me of how little I actually want to be involved with that. Like it bothers me some, because like, sure, I'd love to have them like look up to me and be like, wow, he's doing great. But on the other hand, it's like, this is not how I want to spend my time, not the people that I want to be around. Like being with my friends there, yeah, that was great. But everything else where everybody's trying to show off by like getting into this exclusive party and, paying for bottle service that's absurdly expensive for like no reason, having music so loud you can't even talk with anyone. And like, granted, I'm showing my age here by saying like, oh, the music's too loud and whatever, but it's just like, it's kind of comes back to the choices that you make in your life. So we talked earlier how like the holiday time is a difficult time to have boundaries, because we're back with family. We're back, like we may be 50 and all of a sudden we feel like a child again because we're with our parents and they powdered our bottoms. So like, but it's really being able to come back and focus on, firstly, just what's important to you. And that's a really good question to kind of ask yourself before you get into the holidays, before you make all these commitments, because like, sit down, find out for yourself what that means, and then also find out what that means for the important people in your life. So like, it may be where you are just alone for the holidays, and guess what? That's totally cool. Or it may be that you want to spend the holidays with your significant other, with your wife, with your children, with your whole entire family, with cousins and everything. But like, it's important to do it because that's what you want to do. And because that would bring value to the other people's lives as well, as opposed to doing it because of some obligation. And that's one thing that I always think of. You taught me this so long ago that like I remember I was asking you something and you're like, well, if you didn't have the obligation, would you still do it? And I was like, no, absolutely not. And you're like, well, then don't do it. And
the counterfactual, right?
Yeah.
No, it's the counterfactual. It's the idea that, like so many of us, we act because of these obligations imposed on us from so many different areas of life. And ask yourself that counterfactual question. If it did not exist, if I didn't have that obligation, would I still do it? And it's a great way to ask yourself, does this actually matter to me? You raised a couple other good points too. When is the music too loud? Yeah, such a good one. No, but seriously, like, yeah, I think there's something I think actually worth trying sometimes too is like, if you feel really stressed about it, don't go. Give yourself 1 year where you don't go, or you visit the people on a different day than the holiday itself, when it's less intense, and just give yourself that time to see, like, do I feel better? Is this better for me? Sometimes I used to like that when when you're dating somebody and you're trying to see multiple parents and stuff, like, my parents were divorced, so it's like, even harder. Seeing sometimes some family on days that are not the holiday itself, it's really nice because it breaks it up and you have less stress, I think, instead of trying to do it all one day where you're just running around like an idiot and not really, seeing anyone.
Dude, that's a great point. If you can do it, because, like everybody travels on Thanksgiving and everybody travels on Christmas, but you go a few days on either side, nobody's traveling. So like all the traffic that you had to deal with, all the headaches you had to deal with, like from all those other people, if you can just separate, and like, granted, it would be nice to celebrate it on the holiday, but like, why is the fourth Thursday in November so important? Like, why?
Yeah, dude, that used to crack me up too. It's like, who cares if it's this day? I mean, it could be any day I want, like, and if it's closed, what the hell is the difference? But that used to crack me up too, like when dealing with divorced parents, right? Like the big deal of getting everybody on that day. Like it was like so important. It's like, does the 26th really matter that much or the 24th? You know, it's like, is this the end of the world? It's
Yeah.
like it's it's really funny, but you know, it's like these struggles that we and it's I think we gotta realize too that like so much of the pressure is self-imposed. You know,
Mm.
and I know it's hard, but it's like we're letting, you know, families probably the best at guilt tripping, at making us feel bad for not doing something, but we're also letting it affect us. And I think, you know, realizing that in a large part, right, it's up to us. And I think, you know, that is a good starting point too.
That's a great point. Reminds me another thing that you taught us, or you taught me. But so the first thing is like asking the question, like, is this worth losing my peace of mind over? Because there's going to be
Yeah,
so many situations and so many opportunities over the holidays to lose your peace of mind. And really, it all comes down to you. Like, is this worth losing it? And most of the time, the answer is no. I'll give you a hint, but
yeah, yeah.
we still just go off the wall. And then the second question, because like we lose our peace of mind, and all of a sudden anger comes up. And I love how you were like, when was anger ever helpful? Which is another
Yeah.
great question, because it's like you ask yourself, you prepare yourself with those two questions, like write them down on a sheet of paper,
Yeah.
just to reference a few times a day, especially when you're there with family on the holidays,
Oh
because
God. Yeah.
guaranteed they will push your buttons. They know how to push your buttons better than anybody else on the planet. They've been doing it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so
They're
by
professionals.
having by having those ready, go get freaking furious. Lose your peace of mind. Like go storming out of the house and then bring that card out of your pocket and be like, is this worth losing my peace of mind? No. When has anger ever been helpful? Well, it's definitely not now.
No.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And then you can laugh about it a little bit and remember this podcast and then be like, hey, it's
I
okay. I'm
got it.
human. Yeah.
Well, I
I'm
think too
human.
that's right. Remembering we're human, right? Everybody's gonna make mistakes. You know, things happen. It's okay. And the other thing is too, like you don't have to engage. I think this is funny. You always hear like I love it because every time the holidays come around, like NPR and stuff, always on the radio has a whole thing about like how to handle the politics during the holidays. And it's like, what about the fact that you just don't have to engage? You don't have to respond. You can just nod your head and be like, whatever, I don't want to talk about it right now, or change the topic. And it's like, I think we forget that, like, you just don't have to do it, like there's you can just walk outside, take a little walk, do something else. It's whatever. There's a lot of ways to just avoid talking about it if you don't want to. And I think for a lot of us, that's another source of stress is like going and knowing like these conversations are gonna come up. There's gonna be, maybe difficult family relationships that have to be sort of, tiptoed around or what have you. And just remember, you don't have to necessarily be a part of it. You can watch the spectacle and, laugh.
Yeah, it's like I remember when I was young, there was a saying, something along the lines of like, you just don't talk about money, sex, and politics. Like
Yeah,
that was just like you just don't talk about those things because it's just going to start an argument. And yet
yeah.
we go to these family things, and those are like the things we talk about all the time is money, sex, and politics. And yeah, it's insult to injury.
It is. And it's like sometimes too, I think you start to notice that certain people want the drama. They want the argument. And then you gotta ask yourself that other difficult question, which is it worth going to these things, seeing certain people, if that's what they want, and really all they're trying to do is get you worked up and stressed. Maybe that's a situation where taking a break is not a bad idea. Giving yourself some time
Mhm.
out from that particular family member or that particular event and seeing how it goes if you don't do it. I think that's a good one too.
Mm. Here and then here's another thing. I read it the other day. It said kindness is loving someone more than they deserve.
Oh, that's nice.
I know that just my mind got blown. So love kindness is loving someone more than they deserve. So like practicing kindness with friends and family around the holidays, because these people are going to be like, oh, you know, they're really going to get you. And you can actually practice that. You can actually love them more than they deserve at the moment, which is a really good practice.
Yeah, it is, and it's challenging, but it's like I like that too because it reminds you not to sort of not to let your emotions kind of overtake you and engage in that argument, engage in that anger. Yeah,
And
you
you
know, it's
can
funny. I was just oh, go ahead. Yeah,
and you can gamify it. You
yeah,
can like that's the cool part about it is you can be like, you totally don't deserve this right now. You are being an absolute POS, but you know what? I'm gonna love you anyways right now. And you can gamify it and it actually becomes fun. And like you get to become like a whole new person.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day too. Like, you know, all the friends and stuff that I really care about the most, like, and like, like our relationship too. It's funny, like, I've always noticed that over my life, like, they're the people that, like, if I can't make something, they totally understand. Like, not a big deal, right? Like, if you ever like look at your life, like the people that you probably have the best relationships with are the ones who also understand you and are not putting excess pressure and guilt tripping just because you missed something, right? Or you can't make it. And I think we forget that a lot too. That oftentimes I think like, a lot of these relationships, it's like they're built on this like, negativity instead of, what is the point of the holiday? What is the point of getting together at the holidays? Ask yourself that. Like, isn't it to like have a good experience, to enjoy being with people you love?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Dan, because that is an amazing segue. I don't think we could have even planned it
Boom.
that well. Yeah, I know, right? So we have two holidays coming up. We have Thanksgiving coming up. We have Christmas coming up. And yes, like Thanksgiving, celebrating how generous the Native American indigenous people were with the European settlers when they came over. Christmas, celebrating the birth of Christ. But they also have other more more characteristic meanings behind them, things that can actually build character, virtues you can work on, which are
Oh yeah.
important. So Thanksgiving would be gratitude, you know, giving prayers of
Yeah.
thanksgiving, being grateful for all the goodness. And then Christmas is generosity. These are two very, very important virtues in anyone's life, gratitude and generosity. And these holidays actually give us a great chance, an opportunity to practice them in a world that is receptive of them, particularly during that season.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think with generosity too, the idea or with gratitude, sorry, because that's the first one. I'm
I didn't
Italian.
bring it up, by the way. You brought it up with that amazing segue.
I know. But with I was trying to, be generous. But with gratitude, I think it's actually expressing thanks. Have you ever tried doing that on Thanksgiving? Like actually writing down, like, what are 5 things I'm really thankful for this year, that really are important, or this day or whatever. I think it's a great time to really practice that and look at like, I always think of it in terms of, try and think of it in terms of the year, look at the broader picture, like, because it's easy for all of us. I think we have that negativity bias. We have a tendency to focus on what's bad. It's easy to be like, oh, this year's horrible. There's COVID. There's the climate's falling apart. There's the political situation, the nightmare, blah 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 blah. And like, it's easy to fall into that. But I think really asking yourself, what are 5 good things this year? They could be whatever. But like, am I, with people I love? Do I have, do I have time to do things that I really want to do? And, do I enjoy the winter? Whatever it is, you know, ask yourself, try and come up with like 5 things. And it's a great way to really express thanks and maybe do it with your family, right? Have everybody actually express thanks for something rather than kind of just eating food and forgetting about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like I heard this story about a guy who was World War II. His plane or his boat got shot down. He was stuck in like a little dinghy for a couple months. It's not the very popular
Oh my
story, but it's a
God.
different story of a guy. And so, like for a couple months, he was stranded in the ocean, didn't know if he was going to survive. Barely had any water to drink, ran out of food, uh, and like was stuck in a little yellow boat. And when he got back from that, he was very grateful. But he said, it changed my perspective on life because I realized if I have clean water to drink, food to eat, and the ability to go for a walk every day, I'm the most blessed person on earth.
Yeah.
And it's like we forget these things because we grew up in a culture where it's just assumed. But these are really gifts. Like, it's almost like a testament to how much the universe loves you that it actually rains down the most valuable resource for your body for free.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
free, wonderful rainwater that you can drink. And yeah. So, but practicing gratitude. So that's very important. We talk about the small delights, which is something that we do every day, which is just at the end of the day, just write down 3 great things that happened to you today, or, 3 non-negative things or 3 memorable things. That way you can savor the goodness of them during the day. And then another another practice that I actually just started writing down was
Ooh.
journaling about moments when I got something that I didn't deserve.
Oh,
Because
that's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it's like a good collection, and I do it in the back of my journal so I can just keep stacking them up, and then I can just go back there, because there's so many
that's cool.
instances of these times when you got something that was like really more than you deserved. And sometimes we take them for granted, or if we forget about them, or we think, like fine, that happened once. But it's like, if you start looking, and I started like writing these down, and I'm like, man, like I have been so blessed time and time again. Like I can't believe this happened. Like I was back in high school, I was hit by a car. Like I'm
Yeah, I
alive.
remember
Like
that. Yeah,
super, I know, super lucky. I was hit by a car, and I got out with 2
and you
bruised
came to
shins.
school.
Yeah,
You came right
like
in. Yeah,
yeah, super lucky. And like
yeah,
there's all these instances of things where like it's just like, wow, this stuff happened. And
yeah.
it may just have been like, you got into a university that you were trying to get into for a long time. Maybe the loan came through on the property you wanted to buy, or like whatever it is. But like these things that we forget about, that we take for granted, if you just start journaling, writing them down, eventually they start to really pile up.
And I think that's such a good point, is that, like actually writing things down or actually expressing it is really the important point, because it really does. It's amazing at how it really does make us more aware of these things. Like it's so easy, because I think that the problem with things that we should be grateful for is that they're so easy to take for granted. And as soon as we do that, we miss it. Like, it's funny, like even just like think of like, a good friendship, or your romantic partner or whatever, right? How often do you actually express gratitude for that relationship? How often do you actually say like, "Oh my God, thank you for this," or like, "This is great," like, because I think we don't do that a lot. And it's funny because we tend to then get very sort of we get blind to really the great wonderful thing we have, and that makes it easier for us to sort of see these bad things as if they're like really important or defining of the relationship, when in fact they're not. And I think it's really important to keep that awareness, keep ourselves kind of conscious of those good things. It really is. Yeah, it's a great, I like that one. It's a really good point.
Okay, so that's another great segue. You're like the
I know,
master
nailing
of
it today.
segues today.
I know.
So, I mean, you talk about being grateful for your partners and stuff like that. Well, a lot of us are going to be with partners, be with family, be with different stuff like that. So this is a great opportunity to practice gratitude in these situations. Like when you're with your family and they're pushing all your buttons, you can practice being grateful because they were there and they raised you as a child, that enabled
Yeah,
you to be where you are in your life, doing the things that you want to do in your life. You can be grateful for
yeah,
the car that may be not the best car on the planet, but it got you to where you needed to go, and it gets you to work so you can make a living. You can be grateful for the food, because guess what? A lot of people don't have any food to eat.
yeah,
And yeah, and like something that I just found out recently, dude, monks have to go begging for food every day.
yeah, yeah,
They can't buy food. If you give them money, they can't buy it. So they actually have to go begging for food every day. So like you have the ability to go buy food whenever you want it, any food you want, whenever you want it, and
yeah.
you don't have to go begging for it, and like being thankful for that. So like all these different things, these opportunities that you have to be grateful, it's a it's an opportunity to take advantage of the holiday to actually use something that's going to benefit you.
Yeah, actually say it, actually practice it. I think it's a great point. And it keeps us, I think the other important thing is too, when you keep that in your mind, I think it really is helpful to prevent you from then engaging in these things that would kind of derail that sort of feeling of gratitude and that feeling of sort of being thankful. I think, and that's the point of that's literally the point of the holiday, and it's so easy to forget, I mean, and if you're going out, it's so many families, right, in the US, right, they have this huge dinner, right? They then hang out all day kind of and watch TV, maybe a game or something. And it's like if you're not expressing gratitude for that, you should be. Because that is a situation where I think, to stuff yourself and then just relax and watch TV right there. That should be, that's something you should be thankful for.
Here's
If
one
you can be
more
able to do
thought.
that.
Here's one more thought, because you also forgot to mention one thing that people do is they go immediately after Thanksgiving dinner, they go out Black Friday shopping.
Oh
So
God, yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
like,
right now too. It's like on that day. It's insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So here's another thing that like we keep thinking that once we get the next thing, or once we're at the next place, or once the next event happens, or once we have this or be that or do this, then we'll be happy. But honestly, happiness can exist right here once we're grateful for the things we already have. So taking advantage of this Thanksgiving before you go shopping on Black Friday to actually be grateful for the things that you have that maybe previously you wanted and now you got, because it's such an easy thing to want something for a long time and then you get it and then you forget to be grateful for it, because the getting it removes that wanting and then you just
Yeah.
forget about it, so like actually practicing gratitude for the things you've gotten, and these are material things because hey, they're important too, and
Yeah.
being grateful for all of those material things that you have, like just being like, wow, look at this abundance in my life, this is pretty awesome, all over, everything I need right here.
On that point too, I did want to mention, I think one of the things that is a source of stress and a difficulty every holiday season, is actually, buying presents, right? And not going overboard, not putting ourselves in a financial situation where we're worse off starting the next year because we, acquired all this debt that we didn't really need to acquire. And I think for a lot of us, I think, I was listening to something the other day that talked about, like people make even a shopping list. And then as soon as they go out, they get overwhelmed because there's all these deals, right? Thrown in your face, and they end up buying, they forget what they're there for. They end up buying more. So I think it's really important to like make yourself a list, a clear list with like, this is my budget. This is what I'm spending, and really keep yourself within that. Because the fact is, I think, we always want to like, it's wonderful to express how much we love somebody by being generous, right? It is fun. We're not buying for ourselves, so it feels good, right? We don't feel like, we have to worry so much, but it is very easy to go overboard. So I think keeping ourselves in check and remembering that, the people that we love, they still love us regardless of the presence, right? It's nice to express it, but you don't have to. And if you don't have the money, you can express generosity in other ways. You can be there for them. You can help them with other stuff. You can, there's so many things you can do that doesn't involve, you can make them something. It doesn't have to be literally, right, a purchase.
That's a great point. So like everybody thinks you need to buy things in order to show your love. And I used to see this
Yeah.
all the time when I worked as a veterinarian, because we'd have these potatoes of dogs that come in the door that can't even walk anymore. And the owner's just like, I just love them so much. I just have to give them any food that I'm eating. I just have to give them. And it's like, that's
You're
not
killing
really
them.
love anymore. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not really love anymore. And we almost get that way with purchasing things, because we're purchasing because we love them. Yes, we want to show
Yeah.
them love, but at the same time, it's not showing any self-love because we may not have the resources to afford that. And so first thing is like figuring out your finances. And we'll probably have to do an episode on that. I think we did one already, but finances are extremely important. So figuring that stuff out. And, if you need help, there's Dave Ramsey has Financial Peace University. It's probably the best course you could ever do on it. And that'll just get your finances settled. But the other thing is like, you don't actually have to buy anything. Like I remember when I was a kid, I didn't have any money. So like for my parents, I would give them something saying like, this is good for raking the lawn. You
Yeah.
know, this is good for cleaning my room. This is good for doing the dishes. And I would just give them like a little booklet of a bunch of things that I would do. And they used to rip them out and be like, hey, you know
Yeah.
what? Time to clean your room. And they would actually use it, as opposed to, had I have gone and bought them something that probably would have sat on a shelf because they felt guilty because they didn't actually want it, but it was just like that thing that I gave them that they had to do. So
Yeah.
being creative.
Well, the other thing too is, and this is something that I've always felt, it's like, I think a lot of times too, what's better than an object is actually something where you spend time together. Like, like, hey, I didn't get you a present, but I wanted to go to the park with you this day and spend the day maybe taking walks, doing something. Like, there's so many things we can do that are an experience rather than an object. And I think those experiences are nice because it's also saying, hey, I want to spend time with just you for this day. I want to do this. And it doesn't have to cost a ton. And there's, I think that's such a nice way of, really enjoying time with somebody, really having a good holiday and being generous with your time, to express your, love for somebody. It's great.
And that's actually a great point, because you create a lot of memories with that, which is something you won't get from a gift.
Yeah.
And also, like, especially by giving that to somebody around Christmas time, because you say, hey, like, you know what? We're going to hang out. We have these 3 dates between now and March, once a month. You do that with 5 people. That means you have 15 times going out with friends and family over the next 3 months, which historically, January, February, March are the most depressing months. So like, but they're depressing because we often get closeted. We don't spend the time we need to with people.
Yeah.
So if instead you actually invest in yourself by making these people go on play dates with you, then you're much less likely to be depressed during those times of year, because you already have these engagements with these people already set. And so that way you don't have to spend anything on them for the holidays, and you don't have to get depressed in the new year.
Win-win. Yeah, it's really funny. Oh, well, I think that's like, especially in the US, I think that the misconception with generosity is that it has to be through monetary purchases. And I think it's unfortunate because it really does, put so many people in a position where, like, it's almost like you win by getting more, right? It's like, or by giving more. Yeah.
Right. But also, here's the thing that most people are being naive. Look who's selling you that idea.
Yeah.
It's the people who are creating those products.
Yeah.
They're selling you the idea that you're worthless if you don't buy their product and give it to somebody else. So even though that may seem like you're supposed to, it's because you're being naive and you're being sold by these giant advertisers. So which brings us. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say that the whole idea of like the sales, they push this time of year and stuff. It's like, it cracks me up because half of them, like, they're at the same prices you'll get later, and 2, it's like, do you even need it? Like, I remember it used to crack me up seeing people like sleeping outside of a Best Buy back when they used to do that, right? And it's like, how much can you possibly be saving that this is worthwhile? Like, it's like, it makes no sense that you're just gonna like do this to you. Like, it's just bizarre that you're gonna wait in line for 50 hours to save $200 on something. To just work for 20 hours.
I was showing pictures of that, of like the people sleeping outside of Best Buy and the people going crazy over TVs and everything. I was showing pictures of that to some of my friends from other countries, and they literally couldn't believe it. They're like, you got to be kidding. You're like, this is actors. And I'm like, no, that's not actors. Like, that is legit how crazy people go for deals.
Oh, you know what it is too? It's this whole idea that, like, again, I think it's like that we're somehow, by possessing these objects, we validate our existence and our value. And I think that is that's what we're taught, though. And that's a fundamental problem, it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to Christmas, which is, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When snowmen come alive because of a hat.
Exactly. Right.
When otherwise, unwanted reindeer somehow magically saves the day.
When a fat man in a red jumpsuit breaks into your house.
And you give him cookies and milk.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, this time of year is great for practicing generosity because I think it was the Dalai Lama who said, like, the most selfish thing you can do is to practice generosity. And it's counterintuitive because you think by giving to somebody else, I'm going to have less. But actually, what happens is that it's not a zero sum game,
Yeah.
it's actually a positive sum game. You give to them and you get. And the cool thing is that once other people realize this too, then they can pay it forward. So it actually, like, it blossoms. It kind of shows the whole abundance of the world. So that being said, how can we practice generosity around this season? I have some examples.
Yeah, I really like the point too that we really by practicing generosity, we get actually quite a bit. I think it feels good. It's just a nice experience to be able to give and think of somebody else, right? In that really being generous, I think is really thinking of the other person. And yeah,
One more thing.
go
I
ahead.
I would highly recommend anonymous generosity. Not this virtue signaling, let me give to somebody and selfie it so I can put it on Instagram, but
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
anonymous, because then here's the cool thing. You get to, like, giggle about it to yourself. Be like,
Yeah.
oh, I just gave to them and nobody's gonna know about it. And then they're gonna feel really good. It's like a secret that you have with yourself that just makes you feel good. And you're gonna be going down the street smiling, and everybody's gonna be like, why is he smiling? And you're gonna be like, yep, I did. Yeah.
I really like that too because it's also like, that idea of actually giving for the sake of giving, not because you want to increase your status, right? Well, I
Mhm.
think I think we mentioned some good ones, right? That it doesn't have to be material. There's tons of ways to give. I personally myself, I really do like I really like experiences. I really like doing things with people. I find that more valuable, at least in that sense. And I think you can also practice generosity by being present, right? Actually being there, actually there's so many times when I've gone to see family members and stuff, and I look around, and everybody's like on their phones and stuff the whole time, and it's like practice actually being there. Be generous with your time in the sense that you're being present when you're there. And I think that's a great start to at least, really experiencing the holiday, right? And really experiencing the point of it.
Yeah, that's probably the best point there, is giving your attention to people, because attention is one of the scarcest resources available
Yeah.
nowadays. And
Yeah.
so being present with them, because here's another thing, and I don't think that a lot of people see this, but especially with your older family members who you may only see like once or twice a year. So take the average lifespan, let's say 80 years old. Subtract their age from 80. So let's say they're 72. That means 8 years. Now you meet them once a year. That means you're going to see them 8 more times before you're never going to see them again. Or maybe you see them twice a year. That means 16 times. And then you're never going to see them again. And so, like, taking the time to realize the how life is very fragile, and it's not forever, it's temporary. And so that gives you kind of the I don't know, the more fragility of the experience, but like you get to actually appreciate it and then be like, yeah, I better be generous with myself now, because they're not going to be here for me to be generous with them forever.
And that goes back to not taking for granted, right? These things, these experiences, these moments where we get to actually see people. Because I think, that it's important. I like that way of thinking about it. That's a good one. We're really thinking about in terms of, how long do I really reasonably have, right? And keeping that in mind to help you stay present when you're there. I
Because
like that.
we all think it's forever. We all
Yeah, we
think they're
do.
going to be there forever. And then they pass and they're like, but no one ever told me. And it's like, well, they're 80 years old. What do you
Yeah,
expect? Like,
yeah.
yeah, so like realizing these things come up, but like using it to your advantage, thinking ahead.
And with that too, real quick, also like actually, being present and also engaging with them while you're there, talking, asking them things, actually engaging in like conversation instead of going off in a corner. Like I think there's so many things about just, the human relationship and actually fostering that and participating in it in these situations where you really, I think, it makes it a lot better. And being generous again with your time, and wanting to be there with those people.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that quote about kindness. So loving somebody
Yeah,
more than they deserve, being generous with your love. So
yeah,
these
oh
are
God,
people.
yeah,
These are
yeah,
people who frustrate you. You may separate yourself from them for the rest of the year because you just
yeah,
can't handle them, and that's totally cool. Because some
yeah.
family members you don't want to be around that much, and that's totally fine. But like for this day, can you be as loving as you could possibly be? Can you actually be generous with that? Can you move beyond where you've been stuck at previously?
I like that, being generous with your love. That's a good one.
Mhm.
And actually, oh, go ahead. You're gonna say,
I was also just going to say, like, the holiday time is a time when a lot of people focus on giving to others. So, like, toys for tots, soup kitchens, different things like that. And especially, like, because a lot of these organizations were hit hard with COVID just because
oh yeah,
the helpers that they usually had just weren't available to come in, social distancing, all that stuff. So, like, taking a look in your community to see where you
oh
can
yeah,
help out. And, some things that are just helpful is like, if you live near a city, go drive through the city and give out warm socks. Like, that's probably one of the best things. Because,
yeah,
dude, these people are sleeping on the street. I'm sure they go through socks like it's nobody's business. And
yeah.
just like have an extra pair that they could just use as gloves on a night when it's extra cold, you know? So, like, just thinking about how you can actually be of service to other people.
And there's so many ways you can do that, especially now. There's like so many people in need. I think that's a great one, and you can really help in so many different ways. Whether you could give food, you could give socks, you could like give your time. You could actually like I mean, and you could help people or animals even, right? You could find out if the local animal shelter is short staffed and they need somebody to come in and clean or something. It doesn't have to be, you know, a lot. It doesn't have to cost money. It could just be, that you're helping out by giving time and doing something that needs to be done. I think that's a great one. Yeah, and you're participating in your larger community. It makes you feel a part of it, which I think a lot of us do feel, lacking sometimes, especially with COVID and stuff, where we felt like, closed off from the rest of the world.
It's cool because it helps you out in multiple levels. So like one, you get to be part of your community, realizing you're part of something bigger than just your room and Netflix. So like you realize you're part of a bigger community. But um also you get to see you're more valuable than you thought you were.
Yeah.
Like I read about this in that book that I was criticizing a long time, Think Like a Monk. But he was actually talking about how like monks would go out and they would just go to some village and they didn't have anything other than the clothes they wore.
Yeah.
And at first it was difficult because they had to beg for food, they had to beg for a place to stay. But then he saw that they had more value than he first thought because they were able to help the people of this village, help them build things that they maybe didn't know about, or help watch children, or help clean things, do all these different things that he didn't realize that he had all this value contained within him at first, but he realized that it's all there. And by going to volunteer, it gets you out of the daily grind of just doing this one like hyper segmented job that you do every day. You realize, oh, I
Yeah.
can actually do more stuff.
Yeah. It's funny too. I remember when I was younger, a good example is I had when we moved at one point, I had a neighbor who was very elderly, he had some health problems. And I used to mow his lawn. I never asked him if he needed it done. I would just do it when I did ours. I would just do his at the same time. And it was just, that was it. And he said thanks and it's easy, right? You don't even have to, it's a simple thing to do. You can do it by shoveling, if there's snow or something or whatever. There's so many little things that if we're paying attention and we're present and we're aware of the world around us, there's so many ways we can engage in the larger community that are, just really acts of kindness and generosity, where you're giving your time, your effort, your work to help others. And I think it's a great way.
That's a really great practice because like, you know, sure, it was extra effort for you.
Yeah.
And you had to go above and beyond to do it. But like imagine looking at it from his point of view, being like, he must have been so grateful. And like that's just something that,
Well, and
just
you
doing a
also
little bit extra probably made his life.
And it's nice too when you don't have somebody doesn't have to ask first. Because a lot of times we don't want to ask because maybe like, it's hard to, or it's embarrassing or whatever. If you just do it for somebody, you take that pressure off too, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've gone over a whole bunch of stuff for how to
Yeah.
get through the holidays without pulling your hair out and murdering family members. Any other
Yeah, we have.
any other parting thoughts you'd like to bring up before we bring it to a close?
I think my last one would be, enjoy it, right? The point is to enjoy the time, to have, to enjoy the people, to enjoy the time, to enjoy the holidays. So keep that in your mind first and foremost. Don't let these other things really derail you and ruin it. There's no point.
Exactly. I think that's very well said because we all only have a limited number of holidays left. And so we might as
Yeah,
well enjoy them as much as we can and as much as we're able to. And then if we're not
yeah.
able to, remember, we're just human. So
It's
that's
okay.
it's okay. It's okay. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us of this episode of the Existential Stoic podcast on how to get through the holidays by practicing gratitude and generosity. If you haven't, make sure to like, subscribe, share. Also, come join us over on YouTube and the podcasting apps. I'm Randy. That's my buddy Danny, and we'll see you later. Later, Danny.
Hey, Randy.